Welcome to this explainer. To kick things off, do me a favor. Just completely ignore the modern world for a few minutes. Tune out the traffic, your notifications, the screens, all of it. Instead, I want you to sink into a very, very different atmosphere. Imagine this heavy, thick humidity wrapping around you like a wet blanket. The air you're breathing is literally alive. It's this dense, swirling mix of sweet jasmine, really sharp spices, and the heavy salt of the Indian Ocean. We are traveling back to the 1890s, right into the heart of the tenements of Old Bombay, to understand the unseen, gritty machinery of a massive global empire. Okay, let's dive into this, because the contrast here is absolutely wild. In the 1890s, the global trade boom was in full swing, and Bombay was exploding right along with it. At the macro level, history books love to call it the jewel of the British Empire, and when you hear that, you probably picture wealthy merchants, velvet-lined carriages, elegant tea dances at the Taj Mahal Palace. But for the actual workers generating all that immense wealth, Bombay was known as the City of Dust. Their daily reality was cramped tenements called chawls, sleeping on flattened straw pallets, and navigating streets that were just choked with industrial coal smoke and the acrid stench of open sewers. It's essentially a tale of two entirely different cities occupying the exact same space. To really understand how this grand economic machine actually functioned, we have to look through the eyes of the people stuck in the shadows. I want you to put yourself directly in the shoes of Arjun. You're an 18-year-old laborer. You work as a punkah wallah, which is a fan puller, and a mill worker in one of the city's massive textile factories. Your home? It's a single 10-foot room on the fourth floor of a cramped chawl. And you are definitely not alone. You share this tiny, suffocating space with 5 other grown men. The air is so thick, it literally feels like you're breathing damp wool, saturated with the smell of old sweat and sulfurous coal fires. Surviving in this kind of space requires hyper-specific knowledge just to get out of bed in the morning. Imagine opening your eyes in that gray pre-dawn light. You're lying on a crackling straw sack that shifts noisily with every single breath you take. The stone floor is freezing under your bare feet. You reach for a coarse cotton tunic that is honestly more patches than original fabric. Because you share this tiny room, dressing in the dark becomes a literal stealth mission. You've had to memorize the exact rhythm of the floorboards. The third step groans, the fifth one squeaks, but the seventh is completely silent. Well, if you remember to step to the far left, that is. You successfully sneak out of the room, and your very first task of the day, before the sun is even thinking about coming up, is the water run. See, there is absolutely no running water inside these towering tenement buildings. Instead, you grab 2 heavy wooden buckets and make your way down to the communal tap in the courtyard. 40. That is the number of families relying on that exact same single tap. 40 families sharing one source of life. The competition for basic resources starts the very second you open your eyes. So the crucial point here is that these physical hardships, they were really only half the battle. The other half was this brutal economic equation. Historians and economists call this the poverty penalty. It's this insidious economic trap where low-income individuals actually end up paying disproportionately more for essential everyday goods, specifically because they don't have the cash or the physical space to buy anything in bulk. It is a system mathematically designed to keep you exactly where you are. No upward mobility. Let's break down how the poverty penalty just decimated a worker's income. You are working these grueling hours in the mills, yet you only earn a few rupees a month. And instantly, boom, 50% of that meager income vanishes just to pay the rent for your little shared corner of that 10-foot room. That leaves you with a razor-thin 50% remaining to cover food, water, fuel, clothing, the whole shebang. There is zero margin for error here. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the poverty penalty played out in the real-world marketplace. Let's compare the costs. A wealthy merchant living in a grand house up on the hill has storage space and cash on hand, right? They buy grain by the sack and coal by the ton, getting the absolute lowest possible price. But you, the chawl worker, you have literally nowhere to store a sack of grain, and you definitely don't have the rupees to buy it up front anyway. You're forced to buy your grain by the handful and your coal by the tiny scuttle. The result? You end up paying nearly double the price for the exact same goods as the richest men in the city. Poverty is, ironically, incredibly expensive. Now let's look at how this economic trap translates to a physical toll, specifically when it comes to food. Because cooking fuel is astronomically expensive when you're buying it by the handful, you simply cannot afford the fuss of cooking complex, nutritious meals. Your diet is stripped down to the absolute minimum calories required to just keep a human body upright and moving. Breakfast is just a chunk of dense, dark bread. And to wash it down, a cup of tea brewed so aggressively strong that sources from the time actually describe it as being like lye. This intense caffeine hit isn't for pleasure. It's a tactical choice. It's designed to suppress your raging, tearing hunger when the factory machines finally stop. And you need every ounce of that fierce caffeine suppression because this meager diet is the only thing giving you the backbone to endure a brutal 14-hour shift today. 14 hours. Just let that sink in. You're going to spend all of it sweating in a massive textile mill, breathing in cotton dust, completely deafened by the roar of the mechanical looms, burning calories you haven't even consumed, entirely fueled by dense bread and lye-like tea. The psychological weight of this entire existence was perfectly captured by the women living in the tenements at the time. They had this saying about surviving the grueling routine. They would ask, "Stronger for what? You endure the heat, the hunger, the 14-hour shifts, and sure, your muscles might get harder, but stronger for what? You're really just getting stronger so you can work more hours to produce more wealth for someone else, all while you remain, as they so brilliantly phrased it, completely patchwork underneath. You are externally producing, while internally you are just breaking apart." And just when you think the math of survival couldn't possibly get any tighter, the entire environment shifts. As you walk to the mill through the dense morning humidity, you start to hear these whispers down by the bustling docks. The exact same ships carrying the raw cotton and spices that made Bombay so rich have brought something else. People are murmuring about a deadly new sickness arriving. They're saying perfectly healthy people are waking up with terrible headaches and literally dying before the sun goes down. This marks the tragic, terrifying intersection of a global economy and a global health crisis. Throughout the 1890s, Bombay's massive boom as a port city made it incredibly vulnerable. Then, in 1896, the Bubonic plague, sometimes referred to in whispers as the White Plague, arrived directly on a merchant ship from Hong Kong. The speed of this disease was just terrifying. It took only hours, literally from a morning headache to sunset, for the sickness to claim a life. The very trade routes that built the jewel of the empire imported a devastating nightmare right to its own docks. But here is the absolute starkest reality of being a chawl worker in 1896. You do not have the luxury of fear. When a disease that kills by sunset arrives in your city, the wealthy merchants, they can just flee to their country estates. But for you, skipping a 14-hour shift means you don't earn that day's fraction of a rupee, which means you cannot pay that 50% rent, which means you are out on the street. You are entirely, completely trapped by the necessity of the next coin. All you can do is offer a silent prayer amidst the chaos, keep your head down, and keep pulling that fan or working that loom. Finally, mercifully, your agonizing 14-hour shift ends. You walk out of the mill carrying the heavy grime of the factory deep in the creases of your skin. You look out over the Arabian Sea as the setting sun turns the sky this deep, bruised purple. You walk back to the cramped corridors of the chawls, and despite the poverty, the disease, and the absolute exhaustion, there's a strange, brief peace to be found when this city of dust finally goes silent for the night. You sink back down onto that crackling straw pallet. You are a hidden, essential heartbeat of history, even if the grand houses up on the hill pretend you don't exist. Which brings us to a question I really want you to chew on as we wrap up today's explainer. We absolutely love to study the grand macro-level economic expansions of history, right? The wealthy merchants, the velvet carriages, the sweeping global trade booms. But when we look closely at the gritty math of survival, who truly pays the hidden poverty penalty in the shadows of these empires? Who absorbs the true human cost of all that imported wealth? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this reality. Keep questioning the history you think you know, and I'll catch you in the next one.